What's going on, hybrid shooters? It's Jason Vong. We're currently doing a staycation out here in Topanga, California in this beautiful A-frame cabin. And for those of you who don't know what a staycation is, it's pretty much a vacation, but not too far away from home. And as with many of my vacations, I tend to bring a little too much camera gear. And let's be honest, this is paradise for me. Look at all these beautiful ultra wide angle lenses. So today I want to be talking about the best vlogging lens for Sony, be it for APS-C or for full frame. But it's not so much as to say like, oh hey, this one lens right here is gonna be the best vlogging lens for everyone. No, rather we're gonna try to figure out what's best for you. Because a lot of it is going to be subjective. Some people want the best quality regardless of weight, some people might want the widest and the most affordable lens, and some just want something that's uber light without sacrificing too much quality. So in this video, I wanna go over my personal recommendations for your next vlogging lens, as well as offer additional thoughts on things outside of my recommendation to hopefully help you figure out what's best for you. And special thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring a portion of this video. Let's talk focal length first. What is the best focal length for vlogging? For years now, the internet has debated and argued and waged wars against other camera nerds that 24mm is not wide enough for vlogging. We are, of course, talking about 24mm on a full frame. For APS-C folks, you're gonna have to do a little bit of math. That 1.5 times crop factor conversion. So 16mm on APS-C is a 24mm full frame equivalent. I know, it's confusing, but I have to preface that first because 16mm on APS-C may not be wide enough, but 16mm on full frame, oh yeah, plenty wide. So you always have to take crop factor into consideration when you're using an APS-C camera, regardless if you're using an APS-C lens or a full frame lens on a body like this. Full frame users, you have to be careful in making sure that you are picking up a full frame lens for your full frame body, because if you use a 16mm lens designed for an APS-C body, you're not gonna get a 16mm look on your full frame camera. You'd actually get a black hole sucking in your image. But going back to 24mm not being wide enough for vlogging, where did this argument even come from? From this actually, this little guy right here. How can something be so small spark such a huge debate? The RX100 series cameras are among some of the best pocket point-and-shoot cameras out in the market, most notably for their excellent quality and versatile range. Because of the small compact form factor, it's a no wonder that it's a big hit in the vlogging community. Within the last year, Sony released the ZV-1, which is essentially an RX100 camera tweaked solely for the vlogging experience. But the one critique that persists throughout the years for these pocket-sized cameras is the built-in lens, which if you do the math for these 1-inch sensor cameras, gives you roughly about a 24 to 70mm full-frame equivalent. As you can see, I am hand holding this. I'm already sweating, not because I'm tired of holding the cameras, but because it's kind of getting a little warm where I'm at right now. But it's kind of cutting off my head a little bit. It probably doesn't help that I also have active stabilization turned on, which crops in 10% into my footage in exchange for a more stabilized shot. But the most important thing to pay attention to here is the field of view, which you're not seeing much of compared to earlier. It's not that bad in my opinion, but I can definitely see this as being an issue if you have short T-Rex arms. So if that's the case, I do have several solutions for you. Solution number one is to simply plop your setup down on a tripod on a table and just back up. In a lot of my sit down videos that I do at home, I'm typically at 24 or 28mm, and it works great for these talking head style vlogs. Another method that I find works great is getting a type of tripod that can extend. That way it creates an extra bit of distance between you and the lens. And the one that I'm using in this video is the PGY-Tech Mantis Pod, but another one that I can recommend is this Yulon Z tripod, both of which I'll have linked in the description box below. However, this solution I recommend for lighter setups only, in particular point-and-shoot cameras and APS-C cameras with lightish, smallish lenses. So then, what is the recommended focal length for vlogging? I recommend at least 20mm for full frame and at least 12mm in the case of APS-C. So let's finally get into the meat of the video and start off with the APS-C setups. And these are for the folks who are using the A6000 series cameras, like the A6100, 6400, and the A6600. So the lens that I highly recommend the most is the Sony 10-18 f4. The f4 is going to sound a little off-putting to some creators, but there's just no denying how incredibly light this lens is. In fact, it's the most manageable for a setup like this, and the 4K quality on these A6000 series camera matches that of the bigger Sony full-frame cameras. I did a couple of all-day vlogs with this and remember not feeling too fatigued by the end of the day. On top of that, this is a fairly discreet setup. Now, the 10 to 18 f4 does have OSS, which stands for optical steady shot, which means there's built-in lens stabilization inside the lens. So it's perfect for the a60-100 and the a60-400 users that don't have in-body image stabilization built into their camera. It's gonna compensate for those shakes in some of your walking shots. Now, for some cons. Going back to why some creators may not like this lens. It is an f4, so it's not gonna be ideal in low light situations. But honestly, it's only a huge concern if what you're vlogging about requires you to be in darker areas a majority of the time. If you're vlogging during the day and in well-lit areas, it's not gonna be a concern for you at all. But if you do find yourself in a dark area once in a while, try to find some light and you'll be fine. But if the f4 is truly a concern for you, don't worry, it's not 2017 anymore, it's 2021, and oh lordy, we have a bunch of different ultra wide angle lenses to choose from. And one of which I want to bring your attention to is this Tamron 11-20 f2.8. While it won't completely dissolve your low light issue, the f2.8 does allow in more light into the sensor, so it'll definitely help in low light situations, and it will provide slightly more bokeh, that background blur. And what's great is that the Tamron is roughly the same price as the Sony 10 to 18 f4, and I can see a lot of people choosing the Tamron over the Sony just because of the f2.8. However, here comes the con. Unfortunately, the Tamron lens does not have any sort of built-in lens stabilization, so if you're using a body without IBIS like the a60-100 or a60-400, just be careful. For a60-600 user, a60-500 users, you guys don't have to worry about it. You guys have built-in in-body stabilization. On top of that, the Tamron is slightly longer and heavier than the Sony 10 to 18 f4, but honestly, it is a super minor trade-off for that f2.8. Moving on. If the f2.8 is still not enough and you want more light, you want more blur, we do have the Sigma 16mm f1.4 prime lens, and for $400, it's not a bad price, considering you're getting an f1.4. However, we do have a couple of trade-offs. No optical steady shots, and it is a tighter focal length. But remember, we do have workarounds for this. Before we move on to the full frame lenses, I just want to take a quick break to say thanks to our sponsor Squarespace for supporting the channel over the years and continue allowing me to provide helpful tutorials like this. Squarespace is an all-in-one platform to create beautiful websites. No coding knowledge whatsoever. Perfect for people like me because I just want to make YouTube videos for you guys and not have to worry about coding my entire website. Simply just select one of their templates to get started. Every aspect is easily customizable with their drag and drop feature. Whether you're in need of a portfolio, an e-commerce store, or even a simple blog, design it with Squarespace. So let's go ahead and move on to full frame setups, and funny enough, I would still recommend the Sony 10 to 18mm f4. For the same reasons that I mentioned earlier, it's just a very manageable setup. And the crazy thing is you don't have to be in Super 35 mode to use this lens on full frame cameras. All you have to do is just zoom in to about 12mm and it'll get rid of that vignetting. That way, when you mount a full frame lens, you don't forget to exit out of Super 35 mode. And this sort of recommendation is catered to someone who is using multiple full frame lenses and not wanting to carry another big lens around, especially if it's just for vlogging. They want something that's light and small to slap on and just roll. Now, unfortunately, this does only work with the Sony 10 to 18 f4. I tried this out with the Tamron 11-20 and it doesn't have that same effect. So the 10 to 18 f4 is excellent only if you already have it in your arsenal. Otherwise, if you're looking to invest and buy a dedicated ultra wide angle lens for vlogging on full frame cameras, here's what I would recommend. The Tamron 17-20 f2.8 is an excellent budget option. On top of that, they are a plastic gear build, so they will feel much lighter to hold compared to most of what I'm about to recommend. Now, if you're looking for maximum versatility, we do have the Zeiss 16-35 f4, and this lens right here strikes a balance between giving you an abundant amount of wideness and versatility. And it's actually one of my top picks. The 35mm on the long end can offer a very drastically different look. Good for vlogging at 16mm and then switching over to 35 for some cinematic aesthetic shots. You can even put your full frame camera into Super 35 mode for even more variety types of shots, with a 35mm on the lens acting like a 50mm. Now the weight is decent, it's not extremely heavy, but after a while you will feel it, which is why I don't recommend going any heavier than this. For example, the 16-35 f2.8 G Master, It's nice, we have the same versatility, and with the f2.8, it's particularly extra helpful in low light situations, but it's also a significant weight increase. If you're pretty jacked or perhaps a deranged lunatic for f2.8 lenses, you could probably power through the burn, but for the rest of us law-abiding normal citizens, we have other choices. Let's take a look at the widest options we have. The 12 to 24mm variants, and my god, these are majestic beings. 12mm? Oh, this is for if you love to show off the interior and the architecture of things, right? It offers a very nice and interesting perspective that a 16mm might not be able to achieve, right? This is 16mm right here, but watch as I zoom out to 12. It just opens up so much. The f4 version, the comfort, it ain't bad. It's on par with the Zeiss 16-35 f4 in terms of weight, but same old story. If the f4 is not enough for you, there is an f2.8 version of this lens, except you guessed it, it's a lot bigger, it's a lot heavier, but in the case of the 12 to 24 f2.8, it's a lot bigger, it's a lot heavier, and it's a lot more expensive. So you'd have to be a low light architectural fiend to buy the f2.8 version of this lens. On top of that, these lenses have a tough time mounting front ND filters if you prefer to use them, but most vloggers would probably opt not to use NDs anyway. There is a rear filter option, but if you're on the move, like going into a dark area and bright area very often, might be a pain to take it off. But actually, instead of those two lenses for vlogging, if you want specifically a really wide look, I would actually sway you more towards the 14G Master f1.8. It is the lightest, widest, fastest ultra wide angle lens, and we have to say that all together because if you hold it to one specific title, it's simply not true, right? It's not the lightest lens, it's not the widest lens, and it certainly isn't the fastest lens, but it takes these three great elements together and they put it inside of this 14G Master right here. And it takes everything great about the 12 to 24 and removing the unnecessary focal length, 15 to 24. In my opinion, if you're buying an ultra wide angle zoom lens just to use it specifically at the widest end, why would you ever need to zoom to 24, right? And because this is a prime lens, it brings a lot of extra added value, the f1.8. And what does that mean? That's right, exceedingly excellent in low light situations. And because it's an f1.8, we get that juicy full frame bokeh background blur. Just look how amazing this is right now. Again, this is gonna be really good for travel, for interiors, for architecture. And comfort-wise, I would say it's slightly lighter than the 16-35 f4 and the 12 to 24 f4. That's pretty crazy. So three great options for you to choose from. However, it does share the same cons as the 12 to 24 variants. Can't really mount a front ND. There is the option for rear filter, but that's up to your discretion. And the only thing that I can think of is maybe it's not as versatile as the 16-35 f4, but hey, nothing to cry home about. Now I know some people are gonna ask me, what about the Sigma 14 to 24 or the Sigma 14? It's kind of funny, every time I make lens recommendation videos, when I don't mention a certain lens that people like, they think I automatically hate that brand or hate that lens, and that's simply not the case. If we're talking about Sigma, I have praised their 24 to 70 f2.8 art lens in the past, and most recently the 28 to 70 f2.8, and their APS-C line of lenses. I've been recommending those lenses throughout my whole entire YouTube career. I think they're fantastic. I don't know, it just feels kind of weird having to justify myself, but I understand that not everyone tunes into every single one of my videos, so they might have missed it, but I think I'm gonna have to reiterate this every time I make lens recommendation videos so people don't have this sort of misunderstanding. But kind of going back to this question that might come up, the reason why I don't recommend the Sigma 14 to 24 and the 14 is the same exact reason for the 16 to 35 G Master and the 12 to 24 G Master. They're just big and they're heavy and not really ideal for long-term vlogging. Otherwise, optically, these are fantastic lenses, and I think the Sigma might have a better price overall, so it's up to you if you want to grab a Sigma lens to vlog with. However, if you are looking for lighter lenses, keep on listening. I am a fan of light lenses, so if you're looking for the lightest full frame lens, not necessarily the widest, then my bias pick would be the Zeiss Batis 18 f2.8. And I say bias pick because I have a full collection, a full set of these Batis lenses that I use on a constant basis, and the 18 is the one that I use for vlogging a lot. However, recently I did pick up the 14G Master, which I'm trying to figure out if I like this one more than the 18. I definitely like the whiteness of the 14 more, but in terms of weight, the 18 still wins. The downside is that the Zeiss 18 is expensive for what it's offering, but the trade-off is that it is uber incredibly light and it's extremely high quality, and sometimes that is worth paying for. I do know that there is the Rockinon Samyang 18mm, which looks smaller and possibly lighter, but I can't attest to it because I've never really used it before. But hey, for 300 bucks, might be worth a shot if you're looking for something that's wide enough and small. All right, here comes my #1 recommendation for full frame vlogging lens, and that is the Sony 20mm f1.8G. This is the middle ground for everything that we've talked about in this video. It's not the widest, but it's perfectly wide enough for vlogging. It's not the lightest, but it's at the more lighter, comfortable level to hold compared to a lot of the lenses that we've talked about in this video. And it's not a zoom lens, so it's not that versatile, but it has a ridiculously close focusing distance for some extra variety of shots. Cons, honestly, there isn't much, but if I had to nitpick, it's cutting off my head just a little bit, but only because I'm resting my elbow onto my body. But again, this lens strikes a balance between wideness and lightness. Let me know in the comments down below which of these vlogging lenses you would choose and why, and if you already perfected your own vlogging setup, let me know in the comments down below what that looks like. Thank you so much for watching this entire video through. I think it's time for me to go enjoy my staycation, so I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.